We're good. We appreciate everybody being here today. We're gonna study a lesson together today from Luke chapter 19. We'll get over there eventually. Luke 18 and 19. But come on in. We got plenty of seats for folks. If you don't see a spot, just come on in. Somebody will scoot over and make room for you. All right. We've been kind of in a series. It's not been exactly defined, but let me tell you what's going to happen the next 2 weeks, just so you'll know. Frank is going to interview Dustin and Jessica Key in here next Sunday as part of our Chosen Sunday, like we have done for the past several years. And I normally wouldn't try to do 2 interviews back to back, but when you have somebody here from Africa, you sort of plan around their schedule. You don't be like, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to have to come back another time. So we're going to have Haley and Noma Malangani here with us from Zimbabwe the following week, the 19th. He and Dorian will be preaching that day together. And then Haley and Noma will be in here with our class, and we'll talk to them and give them a chance to talk about what's going on over there. And you get to meet. I know a lot of you know Haley, but you may have never met Noma personally. So that's 2 weeks, what's going to happen for the next 2 Sundays. But we'll kind of finish up this little series. I guess it started out with our picture, and I know it's on the screen. It's a little bit dark, and you can't see it, but y'all can remember. A lot of you had it on your phone. The dirty sheep lost in the woods, and Jesus was pursuing the sheep, and so it sort of progressed into how Jesus interacted with the Pharisees. I don't know. I guess we don't have to have necessarily a theme, but that's just where it progressed. And I was looking back on some of the notes from the past few weeks, and I was reading our Luke 15, 1 through 2 passage. Really, it's what kind of kicked this whole thing off. It said tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. And this made the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. And that sort of kicked off a series. We talked about the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son. We've talked about the Pharisee and the tax collector praying together in the temple. Ben Campbell did a great job last week talking about the story in John 8. Went back and watched that on Tuesday, and we'll refer to a couple of things Ben said last Sunday here in a minute. But a few weeks ago, I asked this question, and I don't want us to get way off on any tangents, but I asked this question, and we talked about it. Do we differentiate between regular sin and bad sin? Do y'all remember me asking that question a few weeks ago? Do we differentiate between regular sin and bad sin? Can I put them in quotes? Or I don't know what I'm supposed to do with these. And it seemed like the consensus of the class that week was that, well, we don't really want to admit it, but we do it. We think, well, this is just a little minor something, it's a sin, but whoa, do you know what Jeff did? Let me tell you about it. Jeff loves it. I'm supposed to pick on Tim. See, I got you, Jeff, with that. The reason I'm bringing that up again is because as we're studying and reading and getting ready for this class, I went to a Bible study this last week, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this is the Holy Spirit want me to bring this back up again. There was around 45 or 50 people there, and the leader went around the room, and again, I'm not going to get it. It was an hour, so I can't get into what all happened in the next 37 minutes. But the leader went around the room, and he had everybody tell their name and what church they grew up at. And by church, I don't mean like that I went to Atlas. Like he meant the branch, so it was there was a lot of COC, there was Southern Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Free Will Baptist, Nazarene, and then there were a lot of people that said none. They didn't grow up going anywhere. And so that was interesting. And so, it was going around the room, lots of varieties. And, of course, I'm trying to remember all that from memory, which is getting worse as I get older. But the question was asked by the person leading the Bible study because most of the people in this room had stopped attending. Period. They weren't going anymore, anywhere. And this is what got me thinking about our question. Okay, you ready? I'm going to bring it back. Several of the folks said the reason they stopped attending, I felt like, this is their words, and because I got my phone out and made a little note where nobody could see me. I felt like my sins were worse than everybody else's. And more than one person said that in this room. So I thought, okay, that's interesting because we just got through having a class where we said, do we differentiate between regular sin and bad sin? Now I'm sitting here with a group of people and they're saying, I don't go anymore. I don't feel like, I'm not picking on Church of Christ or Baptist. See, I called off a bunch of them. I'm not picking on anybody. So I felt like my sins were worse than everybody else. So I quit going. Now, we could say, well, that's their fault. Or we could say, let's be honest, is it real? Is it real? Because it ties directly into what we've been studying for the last several weeks. There was a group of people called the Pharisees. They're referred to as the teachers of the law. They're referred to lots of places. And they fully believed they were doing it right. And most everybody else wasn't. And we read that, it's 2,000 years ago, and Jesus, and they're walking in sandals, and they ain't got nothing to do with us in 2023. Or does it? Because I just sat in a room this last week with people who said they feel like they can't even darken the door of a building of any kind because they feel like their sins were, well, where did they get that feeling? Where'd that come? Well, that's just their problem. Okay, we could say that. Or have we labeled that? Guys, y'all know I'm just trying to get you to think as we get into this story today, because when we started this 2 months ago, and I didn't put it on the screen because one of the screens were broken, or one of the projectors were broken, and I just had everybody pull it up on their phone. Did we not agree? Just y'all help me remember. Did we not agree that this sheet, dirty, muddy, and you can't really see the picture at all. This is terrible. So pull it up on your phone if you want to. In the background, there is an image of somebody that looks like Jesus chasing this lost, dirty, and we described it. Does this sheet, it represents all of us? Can we agree on that? Or does it, there's maybe a sheep over here we can't see that's a little dirtier than this one. And Jesus isn't chasing that one. Or does that sheep represent all of us? That's what we agreed on, right? Maybe one of us got a little cleaner spot over here behind the ear than another one. And maybe one of us is muddy, but we kind of know where we're going. We said this. We said when something important is lost, then nothing else matters. You go look. You don't schedule a time to look. You drop what you're doing, and you go look. Jesus was accused by this group of people of hanging out with sinners. And then he tells the stories about the coin and the boy and the sheep. We moved on to a story in Luke 18, which is right before what we're going to get to today, where Jesus tells a story about a religious guy going to the temple to pray and a not so religious guy going to the temple to pray. And he freaked everybody out because he said the tax collector was justified. And when we studied this a few weeks ago, we said we've got to be careful Because when you begin to think you're good enough or better, you might be moving into Pharisee territory. And we got to be careful. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the Pharisees. They're not going to break any of God's laws. They develop traditions to help them from keeping to break God's laws. And we spent that Sunday getting into how we do that now, that we sometimes don't want to admit it, but we make some traditions and hold on to them like laws, and that moves us into Pharisee territory. We called it Pharisee land that week. We even named some of them off. The order we do our services, our music, our dress, our coffee, the invitation song, our screens, our ministries, how we organize things. Scripture is our guide, but when we make rules that aren't there, we're no different than the Pharisees we're reading about in Luke. Right? And here's what we said that week. Since we're kind of wrapping this up, I guess I'm doing a little bit longer review. We said that Jesus isn't condoning disobeying God's law. But he is saying we need to use discernment and compassion. In Luke 18, when we were studying this, in Matthew 12, the last time I taught, in verse 7, Jesus said, I want to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. And we named off a bunch of Old Testament passages that he was referring to. The one I love was Hosea 6. This is because I want faithful love, not sacrifice. I want people to know God, not to bring burnt offerings. See, the Jews back then, they want to get the sacrifice just right and cut it just right and lay it just right. And on the right day, and they're like, we're right, and we're right, and we're right. And they forget about the people. They had no compassion or discernment when it meant to take care of people. That's what we talked about. Then Ben did a great job last week talking about the lady in John 8. And Ben, I'm not going to go back and reteach and retell what you did, because you did a great job. But man, that line when Jesus says, whoever is without sin, cast the first stone. Man, that's it. We could just stop right there. Frank, that would preach, wouldn't it? That one line. Whoever is without sin. But she was caught in the very act of adultery. Don't you understand? Jesus said, whoever was without sin, be the first one to come up and grab a rock. That's what it says. And Ben, I wrote down some of the things you said. I'm sorry, I'm going to quote you back to you today. But I think these are some things you said. You said there's good in each one of us, no matter where we've been or what we've done. We sometimes take the worst that someone does and we say that's who they are. Jesus doesn't condone her sin. He says, go and leave your life of sin, but it doesn't define her. From that moment forward, according to Jesus, according to what we read in John 8, that's not what define. Oh, that's the lady over there that they caught in the act. That's not what Jesus says in John 8. Now, I say all that to get us to Luke 18, verse 35. You ready? Luke 18, verse 35. And again, things just pop in my head, and I'm weird, and it probably doesn't mean anything to anybody else. But we've been talking about these Pharisees and how sticklers they are for keeping the law. And then I was getting ready to talk about Zacchaeus, and I got to reading the verses leading up. I was trying to figure out when Jesus was getting to Jericho. That was my point. So he's heading to Jericho at the end of 18, and he's in Jericho in 19. But as I was reading that, I just noticed the poor blind beggar that's there at the end of 18. And again, y'all, I'm just throwing, this is just freebie that ain't got nothing to do with Zacchaeus. But I got sidetracked. I got to thinking, because there was a little footnote in my Bible that took you back to Leviticus when you see this blind beggar. And so I flipped back to Leviticus. And it says that the Jews are supposed to take care of the blind beggar. Okay, see, again, I know this has nothing to do with where we're about to go, but I'm thinking, if I'm a Pharisee and I'm a strict teacher of the law and I'm going to follow the law to the letter of the law, and if Leviticus 25 says to take care of people like this, then why is there a blind beggar on the side of the road? Right? There shouldn't have been one. But, I mean, come on. The old law spells out taking care of this person, but they had gotten to a point, I believe, where he was beneath them. The law says to take care of him, and they're strict rule followers, and they're not taking care of him. Again, just throwing that out. Ben last week, it's the last time I quote Ben for today, Ben. He ended class with this: let's see people the way God sees them and love the way he loves. If you were here last week, you heard that. And I got thinking, how would that change that situation if that was how somebody saw the blind beggar? So the Pharisees and the religious teachers of the law don't take care of the blind beggar, but neither do the Jews, neither do the non-Pharisaical people. They're not taking care of either. So did they get their cue from their leaders? See, we focused on the religious leaders for the last several weeks, but Luke 19 now is going to take us to the crowd. All right? So we're going to get into Luke 19. It's a very familiar story. Sammy is going to come up, and he and I are going to lead y'all in. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. A wee little man was he. Al, if you got a pitch pipe on you, he climbed up in. It's a happy little song, right? He climbed up in the sycamore tree, the Savior, for what you see. And as the Savior passed along, what? He looked up in the tree and said, "Come down from there. I'm going to dine with thee." Isn't it a happy? It's a happy little tune. Does it tell the story of what goes on in Luke 19? It kind of does. It kind of does if you're, we don't want to really get into some of this stuff with our 6-year-olds. So look at Luke 19. Jesus entered Jericho, verse 1, and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he became very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. Verse 5, when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. "Zacchaeus, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today." Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy, but the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. Let's stop right there, and we're going to have some folks here in just a minute read a few of these verses to us so we can get some different wording on some of these phrases. Let me give you just a few quick facts. They're at the bottom of my New Living Translation study Bible. Remember Rome? They're the world empire right now. They're in control of everything. And they place taxes on any nation that's under their control to help them run things. They got to pay for these armies, and they got to pay for all the stuff they do. The Jews are under the Roman oppression, and they hated it. They hated it. And not only are they hating it, they're having to support another government. And so now the most unpopular people in Israel were the tax collectors. And I think everybody knows this, but we need to repeat it. They are Jews by birth, and they work for Rome. They're getting rich off their fellow countrymen. Y'all understand this, what's happening. So again, y'all know me. I've been doing this. I've been in here for 19 years, and most of you, if some of you been in here, this is just what I do. I want us to try to think about it. I want to put ourselves in the story, or I like to put the story in 2023, because it needs to become real to us. So I don't need you to answer this out loud, but I need you to picture a modern day version of this, if you will. Who would you be upset about if they were up in a tree and Jesus stops and wants to go home and eat with them? Don't say it out loud. But I need you to think, what I'm trying to get you to think is, who would be somebody that we're not going to admit it, we're not going to say it out loud, but man, they're rough. Their sin is rough. They're rough. They don't care about people. I mean, it's just not the kind of person Jesus should go home and eat with. Who are you looking up in the tree and thinking, what? Jesus is going to go eat with them? It's just going to be different. I'm trying to get you to imagine, picture. Maybe they've wronged you, or maybe they wronged your kids, or maybe, I don't know. I just want you to picture somebody who you're thinking, what in the world is Jesus gonna go eat with them? Can you think of somebody? Don't you don't even have to acknowledge it. And if you can do this, and I don't know if you can, now multiply it by 10. Or 100. And that's the level of hatred these people would have for Zacchaeus. They don't care for him. But here's the crazy thing. Despite everything he's done, Jesus still loves him. Right? Despite everything he's done, you can't see the blurry figure. Jesus is willing to go after him. Ashley Delano is going to read from the Amplified Bible, verses 5, 6, and 7. Here's the things I want you to be noticing. Notice the actions of Zacchaeus, how he's in a hurry. Notice there's some excitement from Jesus. And then notice verse 7. What does the crowd think? So Ashley's going to read from the Amplified Bible, Luke 19, 5 through 7. If you want to look at your translation that you've got in front of you, whatever one you like to read, but listen while Ashley does Amplified Bible. Kime is going to follow her with the Christian Standard Bible, and then Emily Lambert's got the International Children's Bible. Where'd you go, Emily? Oh, there you are. All right, listen up and be looking for those. Just be listening for those few things. Ashley, thank you. Go ahead.
When Jesus reached the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house. So Zacchaeus hurried and came down and welcomed Jesus with joy. When the people saw it, they all began muttering in discontent, he has gone to be with the guests of a man who is a notorious sinner.
Go ahead, Kime. Take us to the Christian Standard Bible.
When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because today it is necessary for me to stay at your house. So he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. All who saw it began to complain, he's gone to stay with a sinful man.
Thank you. Last one. Emily's got the International Children's Bible.
When Jesus came to that place, he looked up and saw Zacchaeus in the tree. He said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. I must stay at your house today. Zacchaeus came down quickly. He was pleased to have Jesus in his house. All the people saw this and began to complain. Look at the kind of man Jesus stays with. Zacchaeus is a sinner.
All right, a few points from the story, guys, and we're gonna get done here, I promise, in the 12 minutes we got left. It says he's a chief tax collector in the region, okay? He is very rich. There's verbiage here in these verses that aren't used in some other places in the New Testament when they talk about a tax collector. It appears that not only is he a tax collector, but he's like the manager of the tax collectors, right? He's the North Israel region manager of all the tax collectors. So it's not that enough that he is a tax guy. Like the Pharisee and the tax collector went up to the temple to pray. We studied that story. This is the main tax guy. Like when these guys, the people that they hate, have a question, they go talk to Zacchaeus. So they hate him even more. All right? He's very rich. He is Elon Musk rich. Right? Isn't that the richest person now? I get it all mixed up. But here's the crazy thing. He wants to see Jesus. Why would somebody this bad, this lost, this can't find their way want to see Jesus? And so I was wrestling with that all week, and I thought, there's a spark there. There's a little spark. He wants to see Jesus. And so we're going to talk about the crowd here in just a minute, but let's go ahead and jump to us. If there's a spark and there's somebody and they've just done something and we think it's the most awful thing, but there's a spark that they want to get back to Jesus, what should we do? Complain and tell them to get out of here. No sinners allowed. Let's fan it and encourage it. And it could grow, right? I think that's, he has a desire to see Jesus. So Jesus knows him, he notices him, he takes time to stop, calls him by name, he wants to spend time with him. I think it's interesting that he says, I must be a guest in your home today. Here's what I do. Okay, I'm not going to talk about y'all, but here's what I do, because maybe I know Tim needs encouragement, and I'm like, hey man, we'll get together sometime in the next few weeks. And then what happens? In this story, if I follow Jesus, I'd say, Tim, we are going now. Come on. Let's go to Zaxby's and you use your company credit card and buy my lunch. That's what we're doing. Come on. Let's go. There's urgency. It's not, hey, good to see you, Zacchaeus. Could talk to Peter or one of my people, and maybe we'll get something on the books. I must go today. There's urgency. And this chief, notorious sinner is falling over himself to get down out of the tree. He's so excited that he's going to get to go eat with Jesus. Now, we got to get back to, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I wrote in my notes. I called it the famous church line. Can I call it that? But the people were displeased. What those other translations say, Ashley read Amplified Bible. They all began muttering in discontent. And Kimes translation says, all who saw it began to complain. International Children's Bible, similar, all the people saw this and began to complain. New Living Translation says, but the people were displeased. And I got to thinking, man, how many times in how many different religious settings have we heard this? See, the crowd is not happy with Zacchaeus, all right? And we understand why. We've already talked about that. We've explained it. That was their rationale. Now they're not happy with Jesus. Now think about that just for a minute. They've been following him around. He's healing people and telling these great stories, and they love him, and there's just so many. But he decides to go have dinner with a sinner, and they're displeased with him now. I wrote some sentences down. I'm just going to keep my head down and read them so y'all don't throw anything at me. When the church leaders make decisions today, but the people were displeased. When the preacher doesn't say the things we think he should say, but the people were displeased. When the ministers don't offer the right activities or do the right things, but the people were displeased. When the admin team doesn't figure the budget the way we thought they should figure it, but the people were displeased. Is that a modern twist? See, we focused for all these weeks on the Pharisees and the religious teachers. And I think still, no matter how we talk about it, we're able to separate ourselves and go, yeah, those Pharisees, those rotten Pharisees. Well, now we have a dynamic shift. See, in this story, this is the people. This is just, can I just say, the regular Jews. And they decide they're not happy with Jesus. He's going to eat with a notorious sinner. Well, where have we heard that before? We started this whole thing 2 months ago, the second Sunday in September, reading from Luke 15. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. And so now the people, the crowd, the Jews, not the Pharisees, not the notorious sinners, just the regular folks, they're acting just like the Pharisees. He's a sinner, Jesus. What are you doing? And so here's where we get honest. We got 4 minutes left. I asked you earlier to picture the tree. Picture your person, your group of people, or Luke's writing this story today. If we could bring Luke in 2023 and he's writing the story, I've got to wonder if we're looking up there, would we be any different than this crowd? Did you? Or would we be, yes, I've been praying for that person for a year. And I know they've struggled, and I know they've sinned, but it's not any different than my sin. And they've gone to eat with Frank's going to talk to him about Jesus. How about that reaction? Isn't that the reaction? Isn't that the example that Jesus has set for us? To go run. Which one does the New Testament teach? We say we're people of the Word. Should we ever want to keep anyone from an interaction with Jesus? I look at this story and I think, man, who did this crowd of people think they were? Deciding that they get to be displeased with who Jesus is going to go eat with. And then I think, well, who am I? Who am I to decide? See, here's what happens. You know the rest of the story. The interaction with Jesus is the catalyst for the 180-degree change. What if Zacchaeus had listened to the crowd and they're right. They're right. I have no business going to eat with Jesus. And he lowers his head and he walks away. what if that's how the story ended? Because the crowd was displeased. Well, let's read the rest of it. It has a happy ending. Verse 8, Luke 19. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I've cheated people on their taxes, I'll give them back 4 times as much. Jesus responded, salvation has come to this home today. Oh man, he's really about to make the people mad now. For this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. And here's the line. Luke 19:10, we use it on one of our Seek, Grow, Serve statements on our church website. I don't know the last time you've read it. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. It wasn't enough for Jesus just to go eat with him. He declares him a true son of Abraham. So, who did Jesus come to seek and save? Can we say it out loud? Came to get those dirty sheep. And see, that again, I'm not going to be teaching for a couple weeks, but make sure you remember that the dirty sheep aren't just the Zacchaeuses. They're not just the lady that Ben talked about that literally got pulled from the bedroom committing adultery. It's us. Right? Jesus came to seek and save the lost. And here's the last thing I went back and added Friday. Man, I am so grateful that he does. Because I'm not going to speak for y'all, but I'm lost without Jesus. I'm lost. I am dirty, lost, confused, don't know what's going on. But I'm so eternally grateful that Jesus is running after me. And we need to do the same to other people. That's kind of the end of what we've been talking about for the last 2 months, all right? God, thank you so much for letting us, even though we didn't deserve it, and showing us grace and mercy and love, even though we didn't deserve it, and for sending your son Jesus to die for us. And it's just amazing to know that he's chasing after us. Help us to be that with people all around us, to love them, to put our arms around them, because we're all just the same. We're sinners who need you. And we ask this prayer in Jesus' name.